Good day and welcome to this last video of demand, supply and prices. So we have looked at individual demand and individual supply and the equations for demand and supply, and when we calculated equilibrium income, we plotted it on a graph, equilibrium prices and quantities, and then we looked at a little bit of examples, and now we're going to continue with some graphs. So I want to show you this. So if you have your price and your quantity, and you have your demand and you have your supply, and you have your equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity, we have something that we call consumer surplus and producer surplus. Now, your consumer surplus is the difference what consumers are willing to pay and what they actually are paying for a product. Let's take, for example, my coffee mug. So, if consumers are willing to pay 50 Rand for the coffee mug, they're willing to pay 50, but the market price was established at 25. Then the difference between what they are willing to pay and what they actually paid are the difference, and that is the consumer surplus. Okay, producers have something that we call the producer surplus. So what producers are willing to supply the product for, let's say 10 Rand, and then actually what they are getting for the product, in this case 25. And the difference between that is this triangle here, and we call it producer surplus. Now there's another thing that can happen with a demand and supply curve. The government can intervene in terms of maximum and minimum prices. So we have demand and supply, and you have your equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity, and let's say they are introducing a maximum price. Now a maximum price is a price that is introduced below the equilibrium price. Now we need to look at the following. See where this line intercepts your supply curve. This is the amount of products that is supplied at this maximum price, and then what is demanded. So you can see that the demand exceeds the supply, which will result in a shortage of this product. Now, furthermore, we can introduce again the consumer surplus and the producer surplus. So the consumer surplus can be resembled by this little triangle here. Your producer surplus, your producer surplus. And your consumer surplus is this area here. So you take this line up until it intercepts your demand curve. And this part here is your consumer surplus. So the consumers are gaining this part of the old producer surplus, this here, let's say block C. But the whole economy is losing block A and B, which is not part of the calculation anymore. So this is what happens when you introduce maximum prices. So consumers gain, you can see that, because the consumer surplus is bigger than the producer surplus. But the producers are losing because of the maximum prices that is introduced. The other scenario is something that we call minimum prices, and that is the opposite. So we have your demand and supply. You have again your equilibrium prices and equilibrium quantities, and now a minimum price is introduced, and a minimum price is always set above equilibrium. So now you can see how small is the consumer surplus and how big is the producer surplus. So the producers are gaining that original part of the consumer surplus, B, but the whole economy is losing this deadweight loss of, let's say, A and C. So in this scenario, the producers are gaining and the consumers are losing. Now that's it. That is supply and demand.